Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd, and this is my review of the third episode of the second season of Star Trek Picard. And unfortunately, I feel as if it's back to season 1 level of writing, and I say it with great sadness. I'm not pleased about it, I'm not looking to hate this show. I actually praised the previous two episodes for being much better than season 1 in my opinion. I especially like the second episode because it was very funny to me personally. I used to make a lot of parodies on YouTube, re-editing Star Trek in a kind of a dystopian, dark version of it for laughs, for comedy, and so that episode to me was very entertaining because it's very similar to that. I almost feel as if I'm the one who wrote that episode because I even think I suggested similar ideas in my videos before when talking about season 1. I myself suggested the only way they can fix it is by having Q show up and reveal it's all in an alternate future and that he needs to go back and fix it, and so that's kind of exactly what happened. And so I almost feel as if all my wishes came true in the second episode of the season, so my reviews are very honest. I'm not looking to hate this show, and I think this third episode was very disappointing in my taste because once again I have a full list of flaws, inconsistencies, scientific mistakes, and political stuff being shoved in a forced and artificial way, and the few special effects they did have felt very cheap and lazy. Even that scene when they fly out of the sun after the slingshot maneuver, the camera follows the ship and then you see Earth as if it's right next to the sun. Unbelievably stupid. I just don't, it takes me out of it immediately. It reminds me of that scene in season 1 when you could see 8 suns very close together with a planet in the middle, and you can see all of them together, and then people are standing on that planet without sunglasses when the same Romulan woman did need sunglasses on Earth, and yet on a planet with 8 suns right next to this planet suddenly she didn't need sunglasses. And so stuff like that, all those kinds of special effects which were stupidly done, really annoys me because it could have been easily avoided. Just show the ship flying really fast and then show Earth approaching. Just don't show the Earth right next to the sun in the same shot. And before that, during the time warp itself, I expected to see some kind of interesting special effect. You know, this whole season reminds me of the plot of the movie The Voyage Home, the one with the whales. And in the beginning of the movie, when they jumped through time, they at least try to do some cool special effects. They do not hold up very well, but at least there's some artistic stuff in there, like they were trying to do something interesting with that. And yet here we get absolutely nothing. The only effect they show us is literally showing us time moving backwards for some reason. Basically we see Jurati's tears simply reverse direction and moving back into her eye. That's the only kind of clue of time travel being taking place, and that's it. So it all feels very lazy, and the writing itself is pretty terrible. All kinds of inconsistencies. For example, the previous episode ended with the guys from the Confederacy beaming on this ship and holding them all at gunpoint. And then one of them shoots Romolegulas, and then he falls down bleeding from his chest. But then later the same exact weapons are used against them and they all get vaporized immediately. So why wasn't Romolegulas vaporized as well when he was hit by the same weapon just a few seconds earlier? So stuff like that makes absolutely no sense. I guess they changed the setting. Did they deliberately vaporize all these guys? Even though in the previous season, Seven had a whole scene talking about how she will never again kill someone just because they deserved it. She said it specifically after she had a scene in the previous episode vaporizing someone who was evil, and then she regretted it, and then she told Rios in the end of the season she will never again do that. And then in this episode she once again vaporizes a man. None of them have any second thoughts about it. They never discussed it. Oh, we just vaporized those guys because they were evil racist. I guess that's okay. And then they go back in time. Then we see Jurati's tears rolling back into her eyes. That's the only effect they did. And then we see Earth right next to the sun in the same shot. And then they fly toward the Earth. And Rios says that they're caught in the Earth's gravity. They're crashing to the planet. There's nothing they can do. And Jurati says, but we cannot crash in the middle of LA. People will see us. And then Picard says, give me the helm. I know what to do. And then he's rerouting the course while they show us that the ship is crashing toward Earth, very close to Earth at this point, and he takes the helm, and then he says, I'm taking us home. So with just a few clicks on the helm, he manages to crash in France instead of LA, because we all know that France is right next to LA. It's basically in the same neighborhood. You just press a few buttons on the helm while you're crashing to Earth, and you can just crash in France instead, even though it's on the other side of the planet. So that's the kind of stupidity in this episode. That's the same level as season 1. And then Romolegulas dies, even though he had a plot armor and he could withstand being hit by phaser instead to vaporize. He was only wounded by it, but still he bled out and died in the arms of Rafi. And then Rafi suddenly reverts to season 1 Rafi, and once again starting to berate and attack and humiliate Picard and blaming him for stuff that is not his fault. And isn't she a Starfleet officer and Picard is a Starfleet admiral? That's what we saw in the first episode of the season, that she's back to being a commander in Starfleet and Picard is now an active admiral. So she's now verbally abusing her superior officer when they're all back in Starfleet. So it's not the same as when they were civilians. Now it's even worse, and now it's for stupid stuff that is not his fault. And why did they even kill off Romolegulas? Did they have nothing to do with him? Like, they had no idea what to do with him? This is such a missed opportunity, because I think he could have been the perfect fish out of water character in this season. And in my review of the first episode of the season, I raised the question, I wonder how he'll be able to function as a Starfleet officer with his religion of absolute candor when he will be in some secret mission and will have to keep secrets, or will be on some alien planet in disguise. And in this case, he could have been stuck on Earth of today and having to act in certain ways without revealing his true identity and stuff like that. So that could have been a setup for a lot of fun and funny and comedic scenes of him being an alien who is not familiar with the ways of Earth and having to restrain his absolute candor while trying to fulfill this mission to save the universe and the timeline. And so that could have had the potential for a lot of fun stuff to play with, kind of what they did with Spock in The Voyage Home, because Spock also is a Vulcan. Back then they constantly said that he cannot lie, he has to speak the truth and all of that. So it's a similar idea to the absolute candor. And so there was a lot of comedic situations in which Spock is being honest where he shouldn't be, and so there's a lot of kind of funny situations, funny scenes with him. And so they could have done stuff like that simply for fun and for comedy, and so they just didn't know how to write it, I guess, and so they didn't know what to do with him, so they killed him off. Why not at least keep him around for a while, at least have a few scenes with him in the Earth settings, in a fish out of water situation, and then later kill him off during some action, during some tense moment? That will be so much better than just killing him off before it even starts. So they only did it just to make Rafi angry again, and once again being in conflict with Picard for some reason. And why they need to do that? Like, it makes no sense. It really annoyed me. That's probably the worst part of the episode. And then, even though their ship is without power and crashed on the other side of the planet, they're somehow able to beam through the whole Earth to the other side of the planet to find that Watcher, which the Borg Queen told them about, and they know absolutely nothing, but they're seeking this Watcher. And that's something that annoyed me in the previous episode, that it really should have been Guinan to tell them about that. That would have made so much more sense than the Borg Queen somehow knowing about stuff on Earth that she shouldn't even know. She's from a different timeline altogether, and I think Guinan would have made so much more sense if they simply had her cameo be in the alternate future of the evil future. That would also explain why she had to make herself look older, because that was a xenophobic society, so she could not have lived as an alien on Earth. If people knew she's an alien, that would be a problem, so that will explain why she had to pretend to grow older. And it would explain why she set up her bar in 10 Forward Street, because maybe it was kind of a way for Picard to find her in the alternate timeline. So there was so much stuff that could have been done better even in the previous episodes, and instead they gave that role to the Borg Queen. The Borg Queen somehow magically knows where the timeline diverged, and so they need her to give them more information, and yet she went to sleep. After the time jump, she felt really tired, and now she's sleeping. And they need to revive her, and to do that they need to hook up Jurati to the Borg Queen to help fix the Borg Queen. And then Picard takes a wire from the Borg Queen and just plugs it in Jurati's neck, and then she's immediately hooked to the Borg Queen. She goes unconscious immediately, in an instant. We don't see any nanites going into her neck or any of that, any of the kind of special effects we used to see when Borg tubes would go into someone, it would slowly possess the person and so on. And yet here we see him sticking it in her neck, and she immediately hooks up to the Borg Queen. So that really annoyed me as well. I think this scene would have worked much better if it was Soji who's being hooked into the Borg Queen and not Jurati, who's just a normal human. How the hell would she have the mind power to confront the Borg Queen, who used to control trillions of drones? So her brain power must be like 1,000,000 times stronger than any human, and yet she's somehow able to overpower the Borg Queen with her mind, and so that also annoyed me. That scene would have worked so much better if it was simply Soji who is hooked to the Borg Queen. And where is Soji? Did the writers not know what to do with her as well? So she is not even in the show anymore. She never came with them to the past. And this scene could have been so much better if it was her. That would explain how she can so easily hook up with the Borg Queen and overpower her. If it was Soji, the android, it would have been much better. And so they have this weird scene of Jurati and the Borg Queen being hooked together, and then Picard sits there and talks with Jurati's subconscious, and it's like a therapy session and all of that. And it was done in a way, I'm not even sure if it was supposed to be funny and comedic, or it was supposed to be horrifying or interesting. I'm not even sure what the hell are they trying to do. It was just cringy, it wasn't funny, it wasn't interesting, it was just kind of awkward. And meanwhile, we see Rafi materializing in LA, and she appears in between two tracks with a bunch of garbage on the bottom. And it really seems similar to that scene in Terminator 2 when the Terminator appears between two tracks with a bunch of garbage on the ground. And so I'm not sure if it's a coincidence or it's a deliberate homage. And she's wearing the kind of gloves that the Terminator was wearing in the first movie. And we see Rios appearing too far up and falling to the ground, just like Kyle Reese in the first Terminator movie. So I'm not sure, maybe it's all just coincidences. And then Rafi and Seven meet up while Rios is taken to a hospital for illegal immigrants, and then he falls in love with this lovely immigrant woman, and conveniently she's single and she has a kid, and so it's the perfect family already. Like, we barely get to know them, and it's all set up for the romance and for their wedding, and I can see the whole story from the start to the end right away. And Jurati didn't allow him to take any phasers with him because she said it's too dangerous to take any future technology to the past, and yet they all brought their comm badges with them, and their tricorders and other pieces of technology is totally fine, I guess. So that also seems very silly. And why didn't they put communicators under their skin like what was done in Star Trek TNG, I think a few times, whenever they would go to some covered mission, either on Romulus or on Mintaka 3 when they were disguised as the aliens. They didn't bring communicators with them as the comm badges, instead they implanted tiny communicators under their skin, so it will not be detected, and yet they don't bother to do it here, even though they're in the past. And of course Rios immediately loses his comm badge, and so it's immediately stupid right away. And then in the end of the episode, Picard calls Rios, and everyone can hear it, like the comm badge is lying on the table, and Picard is like, Rios, Rios, are you there? In a way that everyone in the room would hear it. Luckily the room was empty at the time, but it still seems so silly. With their advanced technology, couldn't they adapt a little bit better? I guess their ship was all messed up and they didn't have any working technology to do all of that, so I guess they can come up with excuses, but still it seems so silly. And of course they only have 3 days to save the future, because why would they go back in time a little bit earlier so they would have more time to prepare and to do things correctly? No, they will have to go in the very last second to save the day. This whole episode really reminds me of the recent Terminator movie, Terminator Dark Fate, which was also written in a very stupid way, with all kinds of modern day political stuff shoved in for no reason. And also it reminds me of Terminator Genesis, when Sarah Connor decides to time travel, but she sent herself to just 1 day before the end of the Earth. Even though she had a time machine, she could have easily jumped herself to a year before that to have time to prepare, but no, she jumps to the last 24 hours. And so the same here in this episode. They arrive back in the past just 3 days before the event that will change everything. Why not a week before? Why not a month before, so they will have some time to prepare, to properly save humanity and not have it all in the last second? And so silly stuff like that, the way it's written, is really annoying to me personally. And a lot of it is cliche and silly, and so Rios immediately falling in love with this doctor who saves him, and then the evil cops show up to capture all these illegal immigrants, and then Rios and his doctor friend get arrested together, and I guess the next episode will be all about Rios being mistreated as an illegal immigrant and all of that. They basically gave up on trying to use allegory in Star Trek to promote all kinds of ideas. In the old Star Trek shows, they did raise all kinds of political topics or philosophical topics, or there's a lot of criticism of religion in the old Star Trek shows, but it was always done with aliens, with all kinds of made-up religions, not addressing directly any of today's stuff. And I think it's more clever that way, because this way you're not insulting anyone in the audience, you're not turning people away from it, from listening to it. Instead, you do it in an allegory, using made-up stuff, made-up aliens, made-up cultures, made-up religions, and that way you can criticize all kinds of ideas in an allegory without actually insulting people of today, without getting into today's politics. and doing it in a clever way which makes people think about the issues, which make people debate about the issues. That's when it was interesting, when it actually raised some kind of discussion, something we can talk about even till this day. That's the best kind of intellectual debate, something which is not black and white. And yet in the recent Star Trek shows, they're doing everything in a very simplistic, very black and white way, trying to promote very specific political viewpoints. They just gave up on the idea of using any kind of allegory. They wanted to do politics of today so much that they simply jumped the show to today to deal with it directly, without trying to play dress-ups. So they really wanted to talk about climate change and the rights of immigrants and stuff like that, so they gave up on trying to do it with Romulans and supernovas and all that kind of stuff, and just jumped the whole show into today to talk about it directly. So to show us that illegal immigrants are all really nice people, and it's the immigration police which is so evil and nasty, and they're the bad guys. And so that's the kind of stuff they're putting in this episode. And they also have scenes of Rafi and Seven looking at the horizon and seeing fires and having a whole speech about saving the environment. Oh no, the forests are burning, the ozone layer is depleting, all the pollution is bad. Pollution is bad, guys. Didn't you know that? The ozone layer is in danger. The few things I did like when they're going in the neighborhood and we see all the homeless people and stuff like that. There are a few signs of the sanctuary districts, which is a reference to Deep Space Nine, which had 2 episodes set in this time period of 2024, the whole storyline of the Bell riots. And so I am curious to see if they will somehow work it into this show, or is it just a reference? Is it just in the background and will not ever be mentioned, which will probably be the case. The Bell riots will not play any part in this show. Another interesting bit I saw is that the posters on the buildings in the background showing the early space flights in the solar system and stuff like that, that's basically them admitting that all of Star Trek is taking place in a different timeline from our own, and so it doesn't have to be the same. In this way they can even play with all kinds of events in a more free way without having be constricted to reality. Like, they can do a lot more stuff freely now if they admit it's all in a different timeline to our own. And so by showing us that early space exploration of the solar system is already taking place in this time period, it opens up a lot of cool stuff they could show us in this show, even in this time period. And then we hear Rafi complaining about all of this by saying, how can you have such a contrast between the rich and the poor and stuff like that? That also reminds me of season 1 when she was complaining about Picard having a big house while she lives out in the desert and being jealous of Picard's big house, which made absolutely no sense in the context of Star Trek. And now she's back in the past and she's being robbed by this guy. And she doesn't understand what he wants because he wants her wallet, but she doesn't know what it is because she doesn't know what money is. And then she kicks his ass and steals his money, and then takes his gun, and she knows exactly how to handle the gun, and she knows how to disassemble it immediately. She seems to be an expert on 21st century guns for some reason, even though she didn't know what a wallet was. And then she and Seven have to go up to some high tower to look for that Watcher guy that the Borg Queen mentioned, and they have absolutely no idea what or who that is. And they go up there to scan subspace frequencies or something, because, you know, subspace will not be detected unless you're high up on a tower. And then they're stopped by an evil guard who wants to stop them from going into the restricted area. And for a moment I thought they're going to kick his ass or vaporize him, as they love doing to all the men in the show. But then instead they hug each other and they pretend as if they just want to go up there to take some photos. And then the guard realizes that they're lesbians and he cannot afford to offend them in any way or he will get fired. And then he allows them to go up there. And then Rios gets arrested, as I mentioned, and Picard and Jurati manage to fix the Borg Queen and get the information they need out of her. And the Borg Queen is impressed by Jurati, who managed to overpower her. So most of this episode felt like filler. We don't learn anything new, we don't know who the Watcher is, we didn't see Q, we don't see the Sung ancestor yet, we don't really see any of the things that I'm mildly curious about in this season, so barely any progress in the overall story, and a bunch of political stuff being shoved in for no reason. There's even mention of vaccination chips being under the skin. When Jurati tells Rios that he should never get into a hospital because they might find his vaccination chip and realize that it's from the future or something. And that also annoyed me because it makes no sense in the context of the story itself, because remember, these guys are now in the bodies of their alternate selves from the evil timeline. because Seven doesn't have her Borg implants anymore. That means she's in the body of the Seven of the reality of the dystopian future. So the same must be true for all of them. Also, Q said that Picard is in a synthetic body because the other evil Picard also got a synthetic body, which was, again, a missed opportunity. They could have simply retconned the whole robot body thing completely, and yet didn't for some reason. But anyway, it's been established they're in the bodies of themselves of the evil universe. So that must mean that the chips of the vaccination information is from the evil universe, the dystopian one, the one with the Confederacy, not the normal Starfleet Enlightened Federation universe. And so they're sabotaging their own message if they want to promote the idea that vaccinations are good and the chips are good to have in your body, and yet they forgot that these characters' bodies are from the evil dystopian future, so they sabotage their own message. And that's exactly what I mean when I say that the way they're doing things, when they're pushing their messages in a stupid way, is often counterproductive. It will just turn people away from the thing they're trying to tell them because it's written in a stupid way. That's the problem. And the same with the environmental stuff, the same with the political stuff. It's all written in such a stupid way and so much on the nose that it will just annoy people. It will not change anyone's mind. The only way to change someone's mind is to have an allegorical story which is written well, which will make people think of things they never thought about, to see things from a different perspective. And that's the beauty of using science fiction to show different points of view and all of that. And so that's the thing that the recent Star Trek shows were completely failing at. They simply don't know how to write that kind of stuff, and they do it in a stupid way, which is counterproductive. So it's totally disappointing, and I give this episode 2 out of 10. It's a huge letdown after the previous episode, which was very entertaining. So I guess we'll wait and see where it goes, but I'm not optimistic at all anymore. I think the writing is very weak, and even the special effects seem very cheap and lazy, and so I don't have a lot of hope for this show anymore, unfortunately. So that's all I had to say about it for today. Let me know what you think, and we can discuss all of this in the comments below, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.